All right. It is the first post 2025 Anna Navarro podcast. You were the last one in 2025. Here you are in 2026. How are you, Anna?
I am good. How are you?
I am good. I'm back. It's taken 4 days, and I'm almost feeling all the way back into the world. Happy New Year.
What's your excuse? I was in a completely different time zone, 6 hours ahead. What's your excuse?
I was in Disney World for like 7 days. It was a lot. I loved it, but it was a lot.
Yeah, but the news cycle has not given Americans a holiday break.
No. And I said about 3 different times during this break, I would have bet all the money in my pockets that something that happened was going to be our big story when we came back. And then we invaded Venezuela.
So are you the guy that bet that we were invading Venezuela?
No, it was not. I wish I had.
Poly market?
That's crazy. For people who don't know, on the prediction markets, on poly markets, somebody bet $40,000. Someone opened an account, bet $40,000 that we were about to kidnap Maduro, and then won over $400,000. So somebody had some inside information on that. It's crazy.
And and I think we should know who that person is.
Absolutely.
I don't.
And is their last name Trump?
Well, is it or Hegseth?
Yeah.
Or somebody on Hegseth's Signal chat.
Sure.
Or somebody from an oil company, or it could be 100 people that, but each of them would be incredibly troublesome.
They're also now betting on how long the White House press briefings are going, and there was one yesterday. I just saw this story where it was Caroline Leavitt was talking, and then seconds before the over was about to hit, she ended the press conference abruptly.
So it's the same thing that so it could be like the same thing.
It could be
that
somebody
NBA
who has
stars are getting indicted for.
Theoretically, I'm sure
allegedly,
they would say no.
Theoretically,
yes.
Possibly, whatever.
All right. Well, I got $20 on this podcast going long, so here we go. Let's start by talking about this horrible, horrible video that everyone's seeing now. This fatal shooting of a woman by a federal immigration officer in Minneapolis yesterday. Her name is Renee Good, a 37-year-old mother, a U.S. citizen, a resident of Minneapolis. The Department of Homeland Security alleges the woman was attempting to run over our law enforcement officers. But Minnesota Governor Walz and the Minneapolis mayor are disputing the government's claims with some vitriol. I'm sure you have a lot to say about this. You weren't on the show today, so you didn't get a chance to. But what are your thoughts about this? It's just horrible.
It's so heartbreaking, and it's also so predictable. I think that we have been Trump, ICE, NOM have been escalating these ICE operations, and something like this was bound to happen. It had happened before already, where there have been people shot. We saw priests that have been shot with pepper spray. We have seen pregnant women dragged through the streets. We have seen U.S. citizens being detained. So it's escalated, and it got to this tragic instance. One of the things that inspires me and that reminds me about the exceptionalism of America is that, as you mentioned, this was a white U.S. citizen woman who showed up. This was not her community being targeted. These were her friends and her neighbors. And she showed up in support and to stand up for those people in Minnesota that were being targeted. Look, I think Americans have a visceral reaction when we see masked, usually men, on the streets of America, disappearing people, targeting people, chasing people, usually immigrants and brown and black people through the streets of America. And I think people feel compelled to action. That's what led this woman to show up there. A lot of folks want to jump to the conclusion that she was some sort of radicalized person. I think she's a normal American. I think she's a normal American, outraged and disgusted by what's happening in this country, who showed up to make her voice heard and showed up to be present. Because she, as a U.S. citizen, as a white U.S. citizen, she has the privilege to show up and denounce what's happening to their face, that I think a lot of brown people don't feel, for fear that they will be picked up. It's ridiculous that this happened. Not only did this, there's got to be an investigation. There's 100 different questions that I have. One of them is, how does an ICE agent shoot into a moving car? How does an ICE agent shoot at least 3 times? That's what I heard on the video, when there were other ICE agents right next to her. There was a crowd of people. He is shooting pretty wildly into a moving car with all sorts of people around that car. That could have ended in much more than one death. One death was tragic enough. You know, there's children that are orphaned today as a result of this. It's horrible, and I think it's such a dark time in America, and it is such a stain on American history. I think we're going to look back at this time in American history and think about those times when, for the sake of mounting a spectacle, right? Because what Trump and Noam, who is executing his policies, are doing is turning the implementing and enforcing of immigration laws into a spectacle of cruelty, right? And first thing Kristi Noem does, which is shameful and irresponsible, is with her big cowboy hat, her hat of the day, right? One day she's Cowboy Sally, another day she's Deportation Barbie, another day she's got a cap. I mean, she's got more hats than anybody I know. So she shows up, and without knowing anything, she calls it domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
She did this within minutes of this woman being dead, that they dragged her through the snow, that they didn't allow the doctor who was there to render aid. All of the circumstances are just horrendous, but I'm incredibly concerned at the incredible heightened emboldening of law enforcement, and kind of like this feeling that they can do anything, particularly ICE folks, without any accountability. And part of that is because we have increased ICE forces so rapidly and so dramatically that certainly training and experience has fallen through the cracks. I don't know that if this had been, I don't know who this agent is. I don't know what if he's one of the new recruits or if he's an experienced one. But you'd like to think that law enforcement officers with more experience would be cooler when it came to, would be less trigger happy and more cooler headed.
It seems like it's contrary to the way they're trained to de-escalate. And it's a tragedy for starters. There's obviously going to be an investigation, but the fact that everyone was so quick to go into defensive mode and justified self-defense and really not even pausing for the tragedy of a life lost and, as you said, children orphaned, it's really heartbreaking.
Well, but also, listen, there's going to be an investigation. Mm-hmm. I trust the officers that are going to conduct the investigation. I don't trust the government leadership in Washington that's going to announce and clear the results and probably whitewash the results of those of that investigation.
It's a concern for sure, and it's sad that it is. Okay, so let's move on. We are now in the regime change business, and we are now we've taken over Venezuela. Marco Rubio is running Venezuela now. Let's talk about these military operations. What was your initial reaction to Trump ordering and successfully capturing President Maduro?
Well,
the illegitimate President Maduro.
I have been saying, I think for weeks
on this podcast, you said it, yes,
that there was no way that with as much as Trump had invested in Venezuela, he would walk away without some sort of trophy. There was no way he was going to pick up his toys and go home. We have had 1/4 to 1/3 of the U.S. Navy arsenal stationed off the coast of Venezuela for 4 to 5 months right now, at a cost of God knows what. It's got to be in the billions of dollars. They have refused to give the number. And so I knew there was something that had to happen. I think that for weeks and months, they tried to have Maduro flee into exile, which is what usually happens with dictators. But Maduro didn't do so. And so at first, it was the pretext about drugs, which was a pretext. It was a pretext because if Donald Trump cared about fighting drugs, he would not have pardoned the former president of Honduras. And if Donald Trump cared about bringing Maduro to justice for drug trafficking, they wouldn't have offered him safe passage and a life in exile like they did. They were just trying to get the guy to leave. And I think that, I've actually lived through regime change. I was 8 years old in Nicaragua when one day I woke up as a kid to the commotion that Somoza had left the night before. Now, when dictators go into exile, whether it's Baby Doc in Haiti or Assad in Syria or Somoza in Nicaragua, the Shah of Iran, it's usually because of a ton of pressure. Also, uprisings within the country, civil wars, uprisings, a ton of international pressure. And they take their bags of money, they take their wives, they take maybe their mistress, and they take all of their collaborators and they disappear, get on planes and disappear into another country to go live out their lives in luxury, like Assad is doing in Russia right now, like Batista did in Cuba. There's that famous scene in The Godfather 2 that you love so much. That didn't happen here. Maduro refused, after 5 consistent months of dropping bombs on fishing boats, of oil tanker seizures, of threats, of escalating pressure, Maduro didn't leave. So then, they made the extraordinary step, took the extraordinary step of going in there and plucking him out. The problem with that is that they only plucked out Maduro. And Maduro is the titular head of the Venezuelan regime. But his enforcers, his cruel, bloodthirsty accomplices and enforcers are still intact and in place, raining terror on the people of Venezuela. And I am incensed that the only thing coming out of this administration is talk about the oil. How in the hell is it possible that there are still political prisoners being held in Venezuela today? How in the hell is it possible that there are still foreign hostages being held in Venezuela today? How in the hell is it possible that we are legitimizing Maduro's vice president when we didn't recognize Maduro as president? How in the hell is it possible that we have Maduro's Secretary of Justice, Padrino, and Secretary of Justice, Diosdado Cabello, and Secretary of Defense, Padrino, who have killed and murdered people, still in place in Venezuela? And all we talk about are the barrels of oil that Donald Trump now says he has control of and that he's going to sell in the open market. So look, I was in Spain when I found this out. Madrid has one of the largest Venezuelan exile communities in the world. There are 8 million Venezuelans around the world that have had to flee that country over the last 25 years. The joy, that immediate joy was something that was just overwhelming for that community and for me. And I want to unpack this. I want to explain to people why this touches me so closely.
There were people who were upset when you talked about how happy you were on the show about it. And I think there are people that didn't really understand.
Listen, so I want us to separate the things. I know that they're joined, but I want us to separate.
Yeah.
So here's how I feel about it. Is the action of going into a foreign country under pretexts of law and without congressional authority, does it violate international law? Does it violate U.S. law? Probably so. But here's the thing. It's done. That already happened. Mm-hmm. If Congress was going to have an issue with that, they should have passed these resolutions that they're passing now. They've had 4 or 5 months to pass it. Anybody could see that this was going to happen. We were not going to have boats there for 5 months and not done it.
So here's a question for you, because this is what I hear from people that watch the show but don't necessarily agree with our panel on a lot of things. And this is what their big moment is and their big question is. If Joe Biden did this, if Kamala Harris did this and took out Maduro, would you have anything negative to say about it?
If they did it in this same exact way, yes. Having blown up a bunch of boats, mm-hmm. Yes, I would have something. I would have called instead of saying it on TV, I would have called the White House and I would have said, You are pretending this is about fentanyl. That's ridiculous. You are blowing up boats off the Caribbean coast. That's ridiculous.
But good job getting Maduro.
But you need to get Maduro out. Why do I? Okay, so why is this so important to me? I am a victim of communism. I had to flee my country. Me and hundreds of thousands of other Nicaraguan Americans. I live in South Florida, where there is a community of Cuban exiles who've gone through the same trauma, where there is a community of Venezuelan exiles that have gone through the same trauma, where there is my community of Nicaraguan American exiles that went through the same trauma, of seeing these left-wing dictators, tyrants who have oppressed the country and stolen from the people and caused so much pain, suffering, death, and stayed there for decades and decades and decades. Because, you see, unlike in the United States, where we have institutions that have held, like the courts, like the media to some extent, in those countries,
you might want to check on those,
dictators-
but yes.
Well, I'll go back to that. In those countries, Maduro, Ortega, Fidel, they have every single lever of power under their control.
Right.
And so even though people try to do uprisings, they get squashed like bugs. Even though people show up and vote in elections and defeat the dictator refuses to accept the results. Yes, I know that sounds familiar. And so I don't think this is something, the Venezuelan people did everything they could to get rid of Maduro. They protested by the hundreds of thousands, millions in the streets. They voted for 70% approval for the guy who stood in and ran against Maduro in 2024. And still, they couldn't get rid of him. And so when I see Maduro leave, to me, I think about all of my Venezuelan friends who have suffered exile and family separation and whose relatives have been killed and jailed and tortured. I think of my own situation in Nicaragua, the joy I would feel if Ortega was out of Nicaragua. I think of the same joy I felt when Fidel died.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the lesson, though. Fidel died in 2016. Today in Cuba, almost 10 years later, the regime he built is still in power. The people are still living in abject poverty. Their human rights are still being violated on a daily basis. There are still no free democratic elections. There is still no free press.
Now, the Trump administration's implying that Cuba may be next on their agenda as well.
Well, because the fact is that Venezuela has been propping up some of these other regimes by giving them cheap oil.
Mm-hmm.
And, without that, you don't know how and if these economies are going to be able to sustain themselves. But it is, to me, it is a scandal that the priority, that there's not even an effort by the Trump administration to pretend that their priority was democracy and freedom and justice of the Venezuelan people. How is it possible that Donald Trump gave a full press conference on what happened in Venezuela and didn't mention the word democracy once? How is it possible that he has thrown the opposition leader under the bus and completely humiliated her?
Well, it seems like at this point, Trump is saying the quiet part out loud now. Everyone else is trying to clean it up for him after the fact. But he's saying outright, this is about what's good for the American people. And we'll help the Venezuelans too. But really, my primary concern is taking care of making sure we have oil for the American people and financial profit for the American people.
Well, number one, we need to know how much this operation has cost. Number two, he owes it to those communities that did vote for him in South Florida and were part of his victory to make sure that there is freedom. And Marco Rubio owes it to that community too, that have been electing him for 14 plus years to be their representative. Marco knows that leaving those people there is unacceptable. And I'm sure that the way he sold Trump on doing this, because this is very different from what Trump campaigned on. This is very different from what Trump started doing when he first came to power. First thing he did when he came to power the second time was send Rick Grinnell to negotiate with Maduro. on oil leases and on, hostage releases. So I am sure that what Marco used to sell Trump on this was the whole oil. You're going to be able to make deals on oil. We're going to make oodles and oodles of money on oil. I'm sure Marco showed him the video of Maduro dancing and goading him, saying, "Come and get me, Mr. Trump." Mm-hmm. I am sure Marco told him that getting rid of Maduro was going to be quick and easy, and that Maduro was a coward who, as soon as they started putting pressure on him, would flee the country. Well, none of those things proved to be true. But Marco has learned in his proximity with Trump in the last year how to push the buttons to get Trump to do what he wants Trump to do. And Trump did it. The problem also now is that Trump thinks he is the victor. Trump thinks he is the conqueror. Trump thinks he's, I don't know, Charlemagne, Napoleon, Julius Caesar.
And emboldened to keep doing this.
And, but I don't understand how he's so emboldened when I don't see it as mission accomplished. Venezuela is still under the thumb of a cruel regime. They removed the head. It's like, when you cut the head from a lizard and the lizard's body is still doing everything that it was doing. Well, that's what's happening in Venezuela. The lizard's body is still there.
We talk about chickens in that sense, but yeah, I get it.
Disgusting.
All right, I want to. I think you're right about pretty much everything you're saying there. I want to talk before we
That's
go.
a first.
I know, who knew? I want to talk about your holiday break, and of course your birthday, which we will be celebrating on the show tomorrow because, as we've discussed, you get a little bit shafted on your birthday. But tomorrow we're gonna do right by you, so tune in for that. But tell me about your holiday. You and I didn't talk much.
Well, yeah, because I really wanted to disconnect, and then all sorts of things happened. I went to Spain. I went to Spain for 2 weeks. I went to Madrid for 2 weeks. I did something which I had never done in Madrid before. I usually stay at the same hotel, the same neighborhood. And this time I said, I'm going to be there for 2 weeks. I want to experience more things like a local. So I rented an apartment, and it was great because I walked around. I went into the local restaurants. I went into I grocery shopped. I did all the things that you don't do when you're in a hotel. One of the things that happened to me is, so I love Cuban coffee, but I only love the Cuban coffee that I get in my house and that I get like at Cuban restaurants in Miami.
We've discussed that here because you won't drink our coffee.
I won't drink. No, I refuse to drink coffee in New York. So I took my Cuban coffee maker from Miami to Madrid. And I get there and I'm trying, I schlepped to Madrid with my Cuban coffee maker, which is about this big, and 2 pounds of Cuban coffee. I get there, or 2 pouches of Cuban coffee. I get there and I'm in this incredibly nice apartment. Every kitchen utensil is new and top notch and super high tech. High tech. So I'm trying to, turn this stove on, put the coffee maker on. It goes on for a minute and then it goes beep, 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 and it turns off. I'm trying again to get it on, put it on, works for 2 seconds and then beep, 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 and it turns off. Okay, I'm beyond myself. I'm now like, oh my God, am I going to have to?
Surprised you didn't call me here. Yeah.
I almost did.
Yeah.
And then I sleep on it. I'm very upset and it dawns on me, oh my God, this is an induction stove. I don't even know what the word induction means. I don't know what an induction stove is, but I can tell you this damn stove is smarter than most human beings you and I interact with. Well, so the stove recognizes when the pot is an induction and it doesn't work. So I tried to outsmart the stove, and I got a pan and I filled it with water. One of the induction pans that was in the apartment. I filled it with water, and then I put the coffee pot, my Cuban coffee pot, inside of the pot. I got it was like, what can I tell you?
When did the fire department come?
It was like the coffee pot had a UTI. I got 3 drops of coffee out of that pot. It was such a bust. But Madrid was terrific. Needless to say, the Spaniards think Americans have lost their damn minds.
Yes.
The food there is extraordinary.
I've never been. I'd love to go.
Are you kidding me?
No, yeah, I have to do that.
Maybe stop going to the Spanish pavilion in Epcot for once.
Which is lovely. The Mexican pavilion, and it's fantastic.
And
the margaritas
and actually
are top notch.
To Spain.
Let me tell you.
But what was funny, though, is one day I'm sitting there and I get this, and really I tried to leave you alone as much as possible, and you left me alone as much as possible. And all of a sudden I get a text from you with a video.
Yes.
Tell people what the text was about.
Well, I'm sitting actually in Epcot. I'm sitting on a bench with my family taking a break, and a woman comes up to me and says, "I'm so sorry to bother you. Are you Brian from The View?"
Oh my God.
And I said, "Well, yes, I am." And for those who know me, it's never a bother when the fans come by, and especially when I'm with my family, which this never happens. So my daughters look at me like, "Oh my God, why would someone know who you are?" And my wife rolled her eyes. And then she mentioned she's a huge fan of the show. I believe her name was Jill. I have to double check that. And she's from Fort Lauderdale. And she mentioned that she loves you and the fact that you represent Florida so well. So I immediately saw the opportunity to make a video and send it to you and show you that despite what you say, people in the wild, Bri guys exist.
Well,
They're
before
real.
you get too big-headed,
Yes.
as your father used to say,
Yes.
I just want you to know that I was at the bar of the Villa Magna Hotel in Madrid when somebody walked in and said, "Oh my God, there's Cha-Cha."
Well, I'm not trying to be Cha-Cha level famous. I'm just saying that people are out there. They like the show. They like the podcast. They know who I am.
So Spaniards, you
Yes.
know, they have their own CNN. It's not the CNN, the domestic U.S.
Yeah.
CNN. They have, you know, the View is not shown over there. There's some people that watch it on YouTube. But so in a place like Spain, you know, I'm completely anonymous,
Yeah.
which is great. But when I went to some of the tourist areas where there were U.S. tourists,
Yeah.
people recognized
Cha-Cha.
Cha-Cha. It happened more than once, which greatly offends.
And yet she's very modest.
When greatly offends Al when somebody walks in and says, "Oh, you're Cha-Cha's father." Al says, "Damn it, I used to be
Yeah, I
a
was gonna
man
say-
with a name
Yeah.
and a career.
Yep.
You know, and my own reputation. Now I'm either Ana Navarro's husband
Or Cha-Cha's daddy.
Cha-Cha's daddy."
Wow. Well, there you go. Well, Cha-Cha, cheers to you. I never hoped to be that famous. But
I think one day you're going to be Lily and Grace's father at the
I-
rate they're going.
very proud to be that, for sure.
I mean,
Thank you.
those two girls are artists.
Well, yes. Lily is playing the role of...
Where they got it from still escapes me.
Lily got the role of Fiona in Shrek, which is very exciting. This is a local production. And then Grace is going to be Jo in Little Women, the musical. So that's
Didn't
good.
you dress up as Shrek one Halloween?
I don't think
Oh
so.
no, that's Bad Bunny who dresses up
Yeah.
as Shrek.
Well, I get confused for him all the time. It's like I have a twin. All right. Thank you for joining me today, Anna. Tomorrow, we're going to have a big celebration for your birthday, among other things. And Gael Garcia Bernal is on. And then that's it for Behind the Table this week. But we'll be back next week. And Happy New Year, guys. Last time I'm going to say it.
Oh come on, you're still saying it?
No, just to the end of the week. We're done.
It's
The 7th,
January
7th,
7th.
8th. I don't know.
Oh, this is ridiculous.
All right, fine. It's over.
Behind the Table is executive produced by Brian Teta. Supervising producers are Nathan Getty and Summer Shade. Associate producers are Emily Darcy and Katerina Alexopoulos. And our editor is Brian Davis. Our digital coordinator is Molly Kaiser. And director of publicity is Laurie Hogan. From ABC Audio, Trevor Hastings serves as senior producer, with director of podcast programming Josh Cohen.